Shatamanam Bhavati, Shatayush Purushaha, a benediction that blesses a life of 100 years, lived with vitality, purpose, and an enduring legacy. 100 years, teach the people. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. On behalf of the Padma Seshadri Bala Bhavan group of schools, I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you present here. We are gathered here today to celebrate a milestone, the centenary celebrations of our revered founder, Dr. Mrs. Y.G. Parthasarathy, whose vision built the institution we proudly call our second home. Mrs. YGP's favorite adage, more things are wrought by prayer than this world dreams of, reminds us to begin every endeavor by seeking the blessings of the Almighty for wisdom and for clarity. In that spirit, I now invite our students to render the prayer.
Namo Namaste. Namo Namaste. Girvani. Namo Namaste. Girvani. Nada Bindu Kalasheni. Namo Namaste. Girvani. Nada Bindu Kalasheni. Namo Namaste. Sumanopasita Kalyani. Sumanopasita Kalyani. Sumanopasita Kalyani. Sura Suranuta Brahmani. Sumanopasita Kalyani. Sura Suranuta Brahmani. Umapati Ramapati Vidite Kumara Guru Guha Sammudite. Namo Namaste. Umapati Ramapati Vidite Kumara Guru Guha Sammudite. Namo Namaste. Girvani. Nada Bindu Kalasheni. Namo Namaste.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Our chief guest, Mr. S Krishnan, a distinguished member of the Indian Administrative Service for the past 35 years, is currently posted as the Secretary to the Government of India at the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. And it is my honor to introduce him to the gathering today. He began his journey at St. Stephen's College, Delhi, where he obtained a Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Arts and Sciences. Mr. S. Krishnan's varied experience reflects decades of steady, thoughtful leadership across India's administrative and financial systems. He began by serving on the ground as the District Collector of Virudhunagar, where he effectively managed volatile situations and implemented development programs. He then moved into national administration, taking on the role of Deputy Director at the prestigious Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, followed by serving as the Private Secretary to the Union Finance Minister. His international experience includes representing India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Bhutan at the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. Returning to Tamil Nadu, he served as the Additional Chief Secretary, founding the Tamil Nadu Infrastructure Development Board and Secretary to the Government of India at the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce a visionary administrator, a nation builder, and someone whom we take immense pride in calling a PSBBian. An alumnus of PSBB Nungambakkam, class of 1984, and a PSBB parent, Mr. Krishnan's journey shows us how our very own quadrangle has served as the launch pad for so many illustrious careers. Thank you for joining us, sir. May I now request Mr. Sheila Rajendra to honor our chief guest with a memento as a token of our respect and appreciation.
Good evening to the very many dignitaries who are present here this evening. In many ways, I shed my inhibition for public speaking and being on stage thanks to Mrs. YGP. And I never imagined that I'd be back in a situation where, some of those butterflies would start fluttering all over again, simply because of the nature of this audience, and also because of the level of expectations that it raised. Mrs. Sheila Rajendra invited me a couple of weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago. So let me first and foremost apologize for being a stand-in for somebody who would have been much more illustrious. Anyone from the front row of this audience, any of my other illustrious alumni would have been probably a far better replacement. But having said that, I think the important thing was that I come back and forth to Chennai quite often from Delhi. None of those visits, so many people text me saying, you're here, you're this, you're that. But this is an occasion where across the board, several people from various walks of life texted me, messaged me, called me saying, oh, you're going to speak at Mrs. YGP's 100th anniversary, and this is what we want you to say, this is why it's important, this is what is very important. So I've never had this kind of a buzz or expectation about any speech I've delivered, and that's what truly makes me nervous. It's the memory of Mrs. YGP and all that she stood for. My own first interaction with her was very interesting. I didn't spend all that much time in the school. I spent 2 years in 1982, 83 and 83, 84. So it's a serendipitous decision. My father was in a transferable job. He moved from his previous posting to Chennai and then Madras, and I had to find a school. I had a couple of cousins who went to PSBB just before that. They told my mother, it's a good school, you should put him there. They warned me, saying, when you go to the school, and especially since you're a boy, and both of them were ladies, they said, watch out for the left hand. You don't know when it will come up, right? So I spent 2 years looking out for the left hand. Luckily, it never came up. But having said that, my first encounter with Mrs. YGP was, I appeared for the interview in front of her, and I wanted to actually go into the humanities section. So if you go back to the main school, and you look at that honor roll board, the last person who's named in the humanities section is me. After that, there's nobody in that list. And I'm named there simply because I was the only student in the humanities section. So, there's a story behind that. So I said, look, this is what I want to do. She said, are you sure? So I said, yes. She said, your best marks are in mathematics and science, and why do you want to do this? He said, but this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want to pursue. So she said, all right, it's fine. Then I went home, and promptly my father called me. He was in office, he called me. He said, what did you go and tell Mrs. YGP? I said, I told her this is what I want to do. He said, no, she called me and said, look, I think your son has gone crazy. He has good marks and all this, and he doesn't want to do this, and why are you letting him do this? Luckily, my father told her and convinced her that, look, if that's what he wants to do, let him do it, and that is the end of the story. But I should tell you that, you know, the extent to which she supported every decision that one took, every decision the students took, the freedom that she allowed, the confidence that she gave, is what makes all the difference. That is what makes us all the people we are today. That is what makes Padma Seshadri Bala Bhavan a brand, and that is what makes everyone who went to PSBB also as a brand. In fact, you know, as I was coming to speak here, many former students sent me little snippets which they wanted me to actually relate as their experiences, and I'll try and read a few of those. But one of them told me this. He said that, you know, she left us with this imprint. It's a big problem because they assume that you're always going to be a good person, you're going to play by the rules, you're going to do the right thing. They're never going to assume that you can be a toughie, you can be a gunda, or you can be a thug. Therefore, in other situations, they don't take you as seriously as they would otherwise take students from some other schools or some other type of background. So I think it sort of set a brand and it sort of set a mark. And even when I went to the University of Delhi later to study, people had heard of the school, people knew that bright kids came out of there, and they did a variety of things which was good. So that is the kind of brand that Mrs. YGP was able to build. And let me quote, I mean, it was a very creative and interesting experience to watch the shadow play today, because it sort of reflected many realities. I could relate many things that I was thinking about, what I wanted to say were reflected there. But after I heard Mr. Sridhavembu speak, and after I heard the kind of questions they were, I felt that somewhere I should abandon this effort to speak about Mrs. YGP and talk about my day job currently, which is technology. But I'll try and make a balance. There was one story there about the synergy between Mr. and Mrs. YGP that was mentioned. And one of my friends told me about this occasion that he attended, the 60th birthday of Mrs. YGP, which was held in AVM Rajeshwari. And after all, you know, at that point, the then Chief Minister, MGR, and various other people apparently spoke. And after all the big guns had spoken, Mr. Cho Ramaswamy apparently came to speak. And he said that, look, the one thing that I want to tell you all is that, you know, I used to be part of UAA, the United Artists Association, which was founded by Mr. YGP and part of the theatre group. And occasionally Mrs. YGP would come in there and tell us that this is wrong, that is wrong, change this, change that. And Mr. YGP wouldn't listen to her and would just go along as it was. And then, in the school, occasionally Mr. YGP would try and come and interfere and say, do this like this, do this like that. And I have myself seen one or two occasions when he did try to do that in 1983 and 84. And Mrs. IGP would just ignore him. So, he says this is the perfect synergy that they had to make sure that, you know, what needed to happen and what needed to be done. They were both able to run excellent institutions with least interference from each other. So this was an example that got cited by one of my friends. I'm just reading, and this is about culture, and there are, you know, prominent musicians here today. We heard the young students deliver the invocation prayer, and it was about as professional as it could get. And there were so many others who sang for us and who were part of that tribute song. And you can imagine what is the ability of all of them who participate here. Mr. Ramachandran has just walked in, and his own son is, of course, you know, Anirudh is a big music director, very well-known name. All of these are products. And so I read from one of those products. Mrs. YGP was a pioneer in bringing Indianness to our education by encouraging a variety of things Indian in our education, from dance, music, art and performing arts. This clearly set PSBB aside from other established schools in the city that followed a more Western format of education. She went to great lengths to seed this idea in the school, which included getting cinema artists to speak to her students, which included the likes of Shivaji Ganeshan or even Nagesh on the humor aspect of performing. She encouraged musicians so much that the school has had some stellar musicians pass through its portals, including the likes of violinist Sriram Kumar, vocalists like Vijay Shiva, and this little note is from Vijay Shiva, who was a contemporary of mine in school, Abhishek Raghuram and Anuradha Sriram, just to name a few. Her commitment to education did not limit itself to educating her students. She stood as an exemplar herself when she completed her PhD thesis on Sri Ramanuja when she was well into her 70s. The choice of Ramanuja was particularly interesting as it focused on that person who sought to unite society on the basis of love and bhakti and lead it to a common goal of moksha. Now, the whole point here is that why do we congregate like this to celebrate the 100th anniversary of a person like Mrs. Is it for the family? Is it for the students? Why do we do it? We do it primarily to reflect on their lives. We do it to reflect on what they meant and what is it that we can take away for future life. And since we are talking about technology, let me talk about somebody who is a father of someone who is in technology. Before I came to the school for a while, one of my benchmates, a little younger, was a gentleman who was then known as B. Satyanarayana. Today he is better known as Satya Nadella, and his father, B.N. Yugandhar, was an IS officer and the director of the National Academy of Administration when I was a trainee. And he used to tell us about what are the qualities that made a good officer, that made a good human being. And when I was reflecting on what he used to tell us, and he had done it on the basis of an analysis and consideration of a number of people that he had met through his life and examples that he'd drawn. And I was trying to derive some lessons from what we see with Mrs. YGP. One of the things that he used to talk about was something called the theory of non-exhaustion, saying you don't get exhausted by situations. You allow the situation to exhaust itself by just being there. When you saw the life of Mrs. YGP, the school was founded in 1958. And by the time that, it really caught on in Chennai at that time, we were in the early 1980s. You heard Mr. Sridhar Vembu that these are long-term exercises. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to persevere. So all the way for almost about 20 odd years, it must have been a small school in a small space, and it must have been a struggle to keep it going. She stayed with it, and today it's such a big brand. And she must have struggled with it in those initial 20 years, and which we rarely think of. That is perseverance for you, the theory of non-exhaustion. And it's also illustrated in all that she continued to do thereafter in terms of picking up a PhD, continuing to be involved with students, continuing to evolve, continuing to do things differently. Another major thing that he would tell us is the grace that you reflect, and how there's a principle of equality, how you treat everybody equally. I think my biggest learning from Mrs. YGP, and I think the shadow play also very appropriately ended with the hymn Vaishnava Janato by Narsingh Mehta. It's fundamentally, what is the message? The message is, a Vaishnavite is one who understands the pain of others and who treats everyone with equal grace. Very, very appropriate to her. She was proud of her legacy and heritage, as we all should be and we should uphold. She built that pride. All of us should be proud of our heritage, should be proud of our legacy, should uphold it. But we should uphold it while upholding the right of anybody else to have their own legacy and their own history and their own heritage, and tolerating it equally. The Vaishnava Janato song is all about tolerance, and that is what I think she really taught us, saying respect. As much as you respect your own legacy, you respect the legacy and heritage of others. You don't get anywhere by belittling anybody else. And that is something which I think is something which we need to learn. And that is, again, one of those other traits which become very significant and important, which is empathy. And the empathy that you can actually speak about, and empathy that, you know, she displayed at every instance that you find. The other thing about Mrs. YGP, and at all times, is how much she knew about her students, how much she knew about each one of her students, again, and how much she cared for them. One of my friends sent me a message that she knew her students so well. She never missed an invitation to their weddings or important social occasions. She was at mine, and I married another person in PSBB as well. Knowing her students well had also had another side to it. On the sports day, usually held at Rajaratnam Stadium those days, there would usually be a race for all students. In one of those races, she noticed that the lineup included a boy who was not an alumnus from the school. She went to the public address system and asked him to step out from the race, as he did not belong there. A sharp eye always went with her sharp intellect. So, this was another memory that somebody shared with me in terms of how she cared. Likewise, another memory of a student who as a 15-year-old was invited for an interview at the United World College of the Pacific, and had to attend an interview in Delhi, first time he was going there. And when Mrs. YGP heard about this, she encouraged me to go and gave a 15-year-old the confidence to undertake a 2-day journey alone to a city where I had no friends or family. She then reached out to a friend of hers in Delhi and arranged everything for my stay. So this is how she is remembered, and this is how she helped a variety of students and a variety of people. And this openness to whatever comes, you know, we have to take pride, we have to build in what we excel in. You heard from Mr. Vembu also, the same thing. While we need to build, we need to learn, and we need to learn from everybody. And, you know, it was obvious, every year there would be an excursion, there would be a trip that students would go along with teachers and along with Mrs. YGP somewhere in the world. And I mean, we are talking about 40 years ago. It's not today. Today it's a very common drop of a hat. But those days, everything was an issue. Even getting enough foreign exchange to travel was an issue. I mean, there are many aspects of life which today we take for granted, which were not true 40 years ago. And, but still, she made sure that opportunity was there, and that opportunity was there for many people. That is something which I think is, you know, throwing the windows open and making sure that everybody was able to come in and do what they needed to do is something, and to learn from all of that is something that I think we have to go back and reflect on and learn from Mrs. YGP. The other aspect is passion as a change agent, that life never stands still. And she was somebody who made sure that every stage you kept changing things. It was not the same every year. What I saw in 1982 to 84, my son did not see when he went to the school almost 30 years later. And thereby hangs the story that, you know, the issue that you're not bound to precedent, you're not bound to rules, you're not bound to, you know, the humaneness and the ability to think through things in a humane way, that you don't necessarily say this is the rule, take it or leave it, or this is the rule. And you know, it's often said that she wouldn't take students very immediately and so on. I still recall, this was in 2012, I was serving in the United States, and I was expecting to be posted back to India, so 2010. And I thought that, you know, I would, before I came back, I wasn't sure when I'd be posted back. My older son, I would come and put him in school here. And then I said, okay, where number of explorations, and then obviously it made sense when the father and the mother both are from the school, then you say, okay, why don't we try this out? When I came to Mrs. Shida Rajendra, she has a little way to go to become Mrs. YGP. For more than any other reason, the first thing they told me, you know, nowadays it's so difficult because there's a High Court order that says that we have to first give preference to kids who have finished class 10 from the same school. We can't take people back. I said, look, that doesn't make sense because, you know, this is a transfer case. I mean, somebody is getting transferred from somewhere else, which is why CBSE exists, so that there is a uniform thing across the country. And if somebody gets transferred, you have to find a way by which, you know, this is done. She said, no, but I don't know. That's why I said, okay, let me try and see if I can get CBSE to convince you. And I went away from that meeting. And then I went to meet Mrs. YGP. And she said, "Appadi sonnala, nee yen kavalapadra? Om paiyanukku illada seeta naan kudukren." And that was the end of the story. So, the reason I say this is that sometimes we have to realize that you don't blindly read rules and say that this is what the rule says and this is how far I can go. That's all we are doing, then, you know, we can't be in various jobs that we do. We have to, you know, when you rise to a particular level, there should be an ability to look at things differently. I just recall one other story about another great individual, which I recall on this occasion, not directly related to this, but maybe of interest. S Krishnan was a very well-known civil servant, governor of RBI, finance secretary of India, a number of major positions. There's a story which is told to this day in the finance department in Tamil Nadu, and which was related to me when I was a young deputy secretary, and which his daughter, and incidentally, yes, the link is that his daughter Girija's son, and also his own daughter Vijay Sudha, was an alumnus, so there is a link. So the story about Mr. Venkatrandan goes as follows. The government had introduced in early 70s a new scheme by which a family benefit fund was paid, and if somebody died in office, then they would receive some, those days, 10,000 rupees, which was a huge sum. But there had to be a 5 rupee or a 10 rupee contribution which the officer had to make. So the treasury officer promptly said, oh, he died before the month ended, so we've not made this 10 rupee deduction in his salary, so we can't pay this amount. And when the file went up to Mr. Venkatrandan, the story goes, he pinned a 10 rupee note to the file and said, here is his contribution of 10 rupees, now pay him what is due. Now that is the way rules are applied, and that is the way that we need to think. And that is what Mrs. YGP did, and this is why she is who she is. And this is the message that she carries for any of us. We had great freedom. We had great to question, to think, to do, to perform. We say we want to go to some cultural festival here, there, everything. She would let us go, say, go, participate. We go to other schools to talk to them. I still remember there was a principal of another school, I won't name. She sat me down. She says, how do they teach you mathematics in that school? How do they teach you this subject? How did they teach you that subject? When I asked my son recently, saying, what is your memory? And we were talking about research and development. She started a program called, and this is how, we evolve with time. She started a program called RSIC, wherein young students from Padma Seshadri School and certain other schools go to IIT Madras and spend a few weeks in the summer living on campus and interacting with college professors and others. And interestingly enough, she promoted pure sciences and pure mathematics and all of these subjects which are so critical for research and development. And as Mr. Sridhar Vembu says, this is today's need. The actual number for India's investment in R&D is 0.7% of our GDP. 1/10 the number of Israel. And what is shameful is, of that 0.6% is spent by the government. So private sector investment in R&D is 0.1%. This is where we are at. Now, if we do not encourage people to get into these areas, Madam there asked about, how do we encourage people to get into mathematics? I can speak from personal experience. I don't know what Mrs. YGP and the school did to my son. He said, mathematics is what I want to study, physics and mathematics. And he said, I don't want to go to an engineering college. I don't want to do this. He went and did all of that. And today he's back and he is an assistant professor of mathematics in IIT Madras, recently joined. So, point is, and he says, a lot of that owes to what was taught to him in school and what was said to him here. So that is important. The kind of message that is given out, the values that are built, and the way in which these values are built. So this is something which I think she was able to instill as a change agent. Keep changing with the times. Stay up to date. There are many times that I've seen her in this auditorium, in the auditorium in Lady Andal's school, attending a number of programs, even pushing 90, she would be there. And it's not only Carnatic music concerts or dance concerts. I've seen her in, virtually rock concerts. She would be there. Everything is open to her. And that is what she did. And that is the openness of thinking and openness of mind I think all of us need to learn to retain. We speak today about resilience. The whole thrust of Mr. Vembu's speech, very appropriately, was about resilience. Today's geopolitical situation is such that you can't take for granted what was the reality 30 years ago, where everyone said that it's all right, everyone specializes, you do what you have to do, and you can trade and you can exchange goods in whichever way you want. Today, suddenly the same countries put up trade barriers and those exchanges are not so easy. There are restrictions on what can come and what can go, which means that resilience has to be built country by country. And today, if we talk about data storage, our total capacity to store data in the country, we generate about 20% of the world's data. Our capacity to store data is just about 4%. So unless we create that capacity, you can't even store the data here. And if you're going to, you have to work on things where you are able to get this done. As the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, this is our top priority, to see how do we build this strength over a period of time in every space. In 2012, the National Policy on Electronics came out first. They recognized that electronics imports were rapidly threatening to exceed oil imports. I mean, oil, yes, you have to import because you don't have it in the country. But why do you need to import electronics if you can actually make it? It's taken a while for electronics to take off. Today, we export electronics, many of them from just outside Chennai, but still, there's a substantial portion of the value chain which needs to be brought in, which is why we are working on components, which is why we are working on semiconductors and what goes upstream of semiconductors in terms of design of semiconductors, which is why we are working also on what we can do with the operating systems, with the various applications we use and how we go forward. A couple of years ago, we decided that it was time that we improve the security and other features of government's own email system. And we had a tender and Zoho won that contract in an open tender system, and today government's email system is managed by Zoho. It still resides in our own data centers. The control on the data is with the government, but the management of the system is with Zoho. And this is a positive synergy that we build between the private sector and the government. Simply because, the advantage of working with a private sector partner is, especially when it comes to cyber security and areas like that, the surface of attack that they see is so much larger that they are more up to date with what needs to happen. If we try to manage it in-house entirely, it's always going to be an issue. Similar efforts in a number of other areas are in the offing. This happens step by step. It happens in the face of resistance. It happens in the face of various other issues that as a government we need to tackle, and also happens in the face of where do you see, the important thing here is, just because we are buying Indian, or just because we are buying something which is Indian, you cannot buy something which is second rate. Why should Indian citizens be subjected to anything which is less than world class? I mean, they should, as citizens, they also are entitled to have the best in class products. So what we have to do and work together and build something which is the best possible in the world. And today Zoho is a company which does that. Their success is less with the government, more with the Indian private sector, more with they come and sell to government. So products that we build, and we have to build products and not just services, need to be products which are world class and of world quality, so that our citizens can proudly use them and buy them. And that is the direction, or that is the push of Atmanirbharta that we are looking at, not just blindly to say that, okay, this is Indian and we do it. Then you are stuck in a pre-liberalization era. I don't think we want to go back there. I think many of the young audience probably are not aware. Today, you want a phone, you get a line for a Bajaj scooter. You don't have to wait 4 years for a Premier Padmini car or an Ambassador car. I mean, the older people in the audience will understand some of this. The younger generation doesn't. But we have to, it's that much more competitive and that much more difficult to actually do it today than it was to do it then, which is why it's truly a challenge. We have to do it without tariff barriers. We have to do it in a circumstance where you have to compete with the world, and you have to do it in the best way possible. But I see no reason why we can't. It is an example of what somebody like Mrs. YGP leaves us, that if you think it's possible, it can certainly be done. And that is something that I think she demonstrated time and again, that if you think it's possible, it can be done. And there's that last one quality which Mr. Yugandhar told us about, which I think she also epitomizes, and that is raw courage. Ultimately, to achieve anything, you just need raw courage. And that is something which, again, she epitomized and she did. And as a country, that is, I think, what we need to display. The Bharatiyar song, Olibadaitha Kanninai Va Va Va, probably fits it better than anything else. I thank Mrs. Sheila Rajendra and Mr. YG Rajendra and the entire school management for having invited me this evening. I can't think of a greater honor that has been done to me in all these years that I have spent in the service. To speak, to deliver what is called the Centenary Commemoration lecture is ultimately a great honor, and especially to speak in an audience as eminent as this with so many people I respect so much and who probably are better suited to do this, I think is an even greater honor. But I wish all the students all the very best. You are what will make India in the days to come, and Mrs. YGP lights up the way for you. Thank you.
Thank you all.